Hello friends, and welcome to our look at June solstice 2026. Now I know the June solstice is now behind us, but I thought this would be a nice exploration of how we look at solstice and equinox ingress charts and why they are very important. You know, every year the sun enters into 0 degrees of Cancer, and this is known as the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere and the winter solstice in the southern. It's a longest day, shortest night scenario, or a shortest day, longest night scenario, depending where you reside on the globe. Now, in mundane world astrology, the solstices and equinoxes are considered a vital astrological chart to interpret, to understand what's coming up for a country, for a city, for an area in the ensuing months. Maybe 3 months between a solstice to an equinox, or maybe 6 months from solstice to solstice. This helps us to determine as mundane astrologers what is going to unfold in the upcoming time frame. So as mundane astrologers, we like to check the charts of these events closely to get a handle on what the chart is telling us might unfold. Now, you probably will notice that very few online astrologers actually talk about these ingress charts in their videos. And the reason for this, I believe, is quite simple. Basically, these charts are very dependent upon where you are in the world and therefore what will happen in your part of the earth. So naturally, the amount of charts that you could cast for the moment the sun hits this solstice degree, it's monumental. For example, let's take a look at the solstice chart for San Francisco up here. And then by comparison, let's take a look at the solstice chart for Melbourne down in Australia, right here. One thing you'll notice about the difference of these charts is that they have different rising signs. Now, both of these charts have the planets in the same position, but the houses and the rising sign, especially the houses in whole sign astrology, are completely different. And this gives different effects over the coming months to these two cities that we're using as examples. You could pick any city in the world and it would be different somehow or other. But of course, the ruler of the rising sign is going to be different. The lord of each of the houses will be different because they're all in different places. So looking at the chart of the solstice is a very difficult thing to do in a short online video like this one, because you can't just pick one chart and say it applies for the world as a whole. You have to pick the chart of the area in which you want to explore. However, one thing did jump out at me about the placements of the planets at this solstice, and I thought that the placement of this particular planet was well worth mentioning given the crazy global climate and tensions we're currently living through. And that is the placement of Mars. In this solstice chart, no matter where you're situated in the world, Mars was located with the fixed star Algol. Now, this is nothing unusual in that this occurs every 2 years. Mars will make a conjunction with the fixed star Algol every 2 years. In fact, the last time Mars was in this vicinity of the chart, he made a conjunction with Uranus on the head of the Gorgon Medusa, basically the star Algol. So that was a very interesting time. But of course, that didn't then result in the usual Mars-Uranus conjunction with Algol in every part of the world, but it did result in some upheavals in certain areas of the world where there may have been more volcanic activity or earthquake activity and so forth. So it's not unusual. Every 2 years, Mars makes a conjunction with Algol. However, this conjunction rarely occurs at solstice. So it actually is part of the chart, no matter where you are in the world, that goes forward for the ensuing 3 to 6 month period. It is active and influential for that duration of time. So even though at solstice there may have been nothing relating to Algol-Mars conjunction that unfolded, you may find that in the next 3 months, something will evolve that has to do with the nature of that conjunction in your part of the world. And that's what we're going to explore here. Mars has a lot to say in a ingress chart about the energy of war, of conflict, aggression, revolution, and societal kickback. And certainly we're seeing many of these things quite volatile at the moment. So let's take a look. In mundane astrology, a conjunction between Mars and Algol will be occurring around 26 degrees and 10 minutes of Taurus, where Algol is located. And it represents one of the most intensely volatile, raw, and high-stakes alignments in our celestial toolkit. Now, mundane astrology, my friends, tracks collective movements, in case you weren't aware of this. It looks at the activity of nations, it looks at geopolitical events and macro trends. So when we mix Mars, who is the archetype of war and action, fire, severing, and sudden ignition, with Algol, the demon star, the blinking eye of Medusa, this yields us an energetic signature that is really a profound collective catalyst. And so that's what we might be seeing, quite a catalytic energy on the planet during the next 3 to 6 months. Historically, Algol has a fearsome reputation, and this is derived from its meaning in Arabic, which is the ghoul's head. However, a nuanced approach views this as, I guess you'd say, a vortex of intense primal power. Radical transformation is associated with Algol, and it also has an association with our necessity to face our hidden selves, our shadow self. Now, if you caught on my mainstream Kesenya Astrology channel, my discussion with David Warner Matheson about Algol and the story and the mythology of Algol, you'll know why it's about facing our traumatized self, our traumatized shadow side. So when Mars crosses Algol, it functions like, a match striking a light, striking a fuse. So the primary mundane manifestations of Algol-Mars conjunction, they kind of center around a few themes. Let's look at them now. The first one, literally and metaphorically losing your head, because the story of Medusa is that of having her head chopped off from her body by Perseus. Traditionally, this is an energy, Mars, which is to cut, connected with Algol. It's associated with beheadings in the modern mundane landscape. This may or may not look like literal beheadings, but could actually be corresponding to a severe loss of rational leadership. So we might see this as a political fallout over the next 3 to 6 months. Sudden shocking falls from power, where major leaders or authority figures are abruptly removed, disposed, or somehow visually disgraced on the world stage. A metaphoric decapitation of leadership. It can also be connected to ideological fanaticism. So leaders or collective movements that are acting with absolute stubbornness, this is happening in Taurus, one of the stubborn fixed earth signs after all, refusing to back down until a structural fracture occurs. So we may be seeing that occur in the next 3 to 6 months as well. Interestingly, with this topic, in the lead up to this solstice chart, this conjunction of Mars with Algol, we did hear of a horrific situation, an attempted beheading in the streets of the UK. Absolutely horrible. Was it orchestrated to align with the astrological configuration? I'll leave that to your own sensibilities. Let's find out more about this conjunction. Another theme that this conjunction brings about is the upheaval of the repressed feminine, or the upheaval of the desecrated feminine, if you like. Now, remember, Algol is the representation of Medusa, and the myth of Medusa carries deep themes of unprovoked trauma, injustice, and terrifying power. A Mars conjunction frequently triggers intense societal confrontations regarding mass public outcries, collective rages concerning issues to do with women, protection, rights, or the suppression of women. And obviously that's a good thing if we have collective outrage over injustices to women. Also, this can also represent deeply buried ancestral or systemic wounds that rise violently to the surface. And that causes a collective mass reckoning that we can't ignore. So it wouldn't surprise me, with this in mind, to see more about the Epstein files over the next 3 to 6 months coming back into collective consciousness and refusing to be swept aside, because a lot of that is very Medusa-like and similar to the Medusa myth, the trauma suffered by the young women that were abused in that situation cannot be swept aside. So that, to my mind, would be a good thing if that comes back into the collective awareness to be dealt with again. Then we have high velocity volatility and structural shocks. Let's have a look at that theme. Mars always brings speed and heat and friction. And when it's activating a star like Algol, it often corresponds to physical and infrastructure disruptions. So we see geopolitical exploits happening, outbreaks of localized conflicts, targeted military strikes, high stakes power broking where the threat of violence is used as leverage. That can happen. It's probably going on all the time, really, in various ways and shapes and forms. But we may become more aware of it at this time over the next 3 to 6 months. We see issues around Earth and infrastructure. Now, because this is occurring in the sign of Taurus, it can manifest as literal disruptions to the Earth itself. This morning, before I got up to do this video that I'd prepared to do yesterday, and I was going to record it today, I opened up the paper, and there on the front page is news of an earthquake occurring in Venezuela, killing many people. It's very much the nature of this energy. Mars in the solstice chart in a conjunction with Algol in Taurus. Now, just having said that, we are about to undergo in the coming week, we're about to undergo a conjunction of Mars with Uranus, which also brings about such activity too. So it's like double whammy effects. Volcanic activity. I think there's some volcanoes in Indonesia that are erupting at the moment. There can be several structural accidents that could occur, either immediately in these weeks that we're watching this video, or in the next 3 to 6 months as well, that might affect agriculture, Taurus energy, supply chains, and financial markets, which all have to do with Taurus, of course, as well. In mundane terms, a Mars-Algol conjunction, it indicates that the collective, that means humans on the planet, are undergoing a purification process, and it can be quite a ruthless one. It forces us to confront what is corrupt, what is false, or what is decaying in our global systems. And that needs to happen. In fact, bring it on. Like, we're all absolutely jack of the way the structures are currently configured that do not work in the favor of humanity or the growth of nations or the growth of people in those nations. So it's absolutely time that we deal with these things. So the initial events that cause these confrontations can feel very disruptive, can feel very chaotic, but they are an undeniable torchbearer. They strip away the obsolete and leave behind a new, refined, if you like, purified structure. It's hardened and it's more authentic, and it absolutely is necessary right now. So these are the themes that a Mars-Algol conjunction can bring. And of course, no matter where you are on the planet, Mars was conjunct Algol in the solstice chart. What house it falls in depends on where you are in the world. So how can we tell if this energy will impact us where we reside in the world over the coming months, and how it will impact us, and even when it will impact us? Well, actually, this is not all that difficult to figure out, because what we need to do is explore the nature of fixed signs in astrological timing. And in this instance, we're obviously looking at Taurus, where this conjunction occurs. So let's have a look at a bit of timing astrology alongside mundane astrology. In mundane astrology, there's a fixed cross in all sorts of astrology that involves Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, the fixed signs. But in mundane astrology, these fixed signs represent concrete foundations, core infrastructure, and the structural pillars of the collective world we live in. So cardinal signs, by comparison, they act as an initiating spark when they get triggered. So it's like a catalyst. And mutable signs act as a transition phase. So just to recap, fixed signs represent consolidation, preservation, and deep entrenchment. Very, very important, that deep entrenchment especially. Things that are deeply entrenched are really being severed with this conjunction at this time. So in major planetary alignments such as Mars conjunct Algol occurs here in this fixed sign of Taurus, the energy behaves like a heavy stone or like deep tectonic plates, slow to move, incredibly dense, and highly resistant to outside pressure until it reaches a structural breaking point. I mean, just think about the continents in tectonic plate theory sliding against each other, tense, and then they give. That's what we're talking about. And that's how this Mars-Algol conjunction may break out at some stage over the next 3 to 6 months. In macro astrology, fixed energy governs the systems we rely on for continuity and stability. Each element anchors the fixed cross. It's manifesting a different dimension in our collective awareness. Now, that sentence might be a bit confusing to some, so I'll try and spell it out for you. Taurus is our fixed earth sign. And so Taurus energy has to do with the material world, banking systems, global currencies, agriculture, food supply chains, real estate, and the actual physical crust of the earth itself. So that's what we're looking at. These are the themes of entrenchment that might be going through a tremendous decapitation or upheaval because of this solstice chart. By comparison, let's have a look at the 3 other fixed signs as well. We've got Leo, which is fixed fire. And Leo, in this instance, represents in mundane astrology centralized authority, sovereignty, heads of state, visible pride of a nation, national identity, and the concentration of executive power. We have Scorpio, which is fixed water, and this represents hidden collective currents, intelligence agencies, deep state structures, generational debt, toxic systemic secrets, shared resources, and the psychological underbelly of society. And then we have fixed air, which is Aquarius. This is the ideological architecture of society, globalist networks, social engineering, technology, infrastructure, central planning, and the rigid dogmas of collective social systems. This is where Mars was back in fixed air Aquarius at the equinox chart. And if you remember my videos of around that time, I spoke about Mars being contained in the jar, the water jar of Aquarius, which corresponds to an ancient myth where Mars was Mars the war god, locked in a jar, and he could not escape for some months. I think it was 18 months in the myth. And that, to my mind, heralded the fact that even though people would try to instigate war, now, obviously, equinox occurred last March, and we have seen many attempts at war, thinking of Iran and the USA, war trying to be sort of escalated, trying to be instigated, and it going really nowhere. Yes, there's been a lot of skirmishes and some tragedies, but it hasn't blown out into full-scale war. And I believe that is because Mars at the equinox chart was contained in the jar of Aquarius, which kept him from doing his usual Mars stuff. So let's explore this a little more. When mundane events happen in fixed signs, the collective attitude is typically fixed. It's unyielding. It's stubborn. It refuses change. Compromise is rare. Systems lock down. Positions harden and nations dig in their heels. Kind of like what we saw recently. So, what about the astrological timing that these fixed signs bring about? Well, the duration of fixed sign energy in mundane astrology, it's characterized by delay, a delayed fuse, maximum tension, maximum pressure, and a long historical wait, if it evolves into anything at all. Sometimes the fixed energy is so great that nothing comes of it. Nothing changes, despite perhaps the necessity that it should. So, as you can see, fixed signs and their activations operate on a completely different timeline than the cardinal signs or the mutable signs. So firstly, there's a heavy build-up when something happens in a fixed sign. Fixed energy rarely explodes out of nowhere. We see it coming, we feel its tension building, because fixed signs are designed to hold. They actually absorb immense amounts of stress and friction and pressure before they show external signs of, cracking. In mundane astrology, a transit like this one we're looking at, Mars conjunct with Algol through a fixed sign, can feel stagnant or stuck for months or even years. So it's a little bit like Mars in the jar of Aquarius, also a fixed sign, where we're not seeing any momentum, any traction, even though the conjunction with Algol promises certain changes. It's not going to happen easily, suddenly, or overnight. The tension builds silently behind closed doors and beneath the surface even, so that it ends up exploding like a volcano or like an earthquake. It's a shatter point. Now, because fixed signs resist change, when change finally does arrive, it doesn't happen smoothly. It happens through structural fracture. Like an earthquake, the tension builds along a fault line for decades until the rock shatters instantly. In mundane terms, when a fixed system breaks, like a currency collapse in Taurus or a regime toppling effect in Leo, the initial breaking point is really violent and definitive. Because the old structure refused to bend, it ends up getting shattered. Now, this can have a long effect. Once a fixed sign conjunction like this one in a solstice chart occurs, the aftermath dominates the mundane astrology, which geopolitical, etc., like I said before, it dominates it for a significant duration. So when we have a conjunction now, Mars, not necessarily considered to be an outer planet like Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto, but it is still a very important component of our solar system. In fact, many people believe that Mars is in a binary system with our Sun, which makes it quite a central figure for us. We may find that this outer planet is further out than the Earth, cements a new status quo when it conjuncts with Algol. And this could happen in legislative, financial, or geopolitical structures that we've been living with for many, many years, that have stuck around for decades. Now they're going to go through that, like I've been describing, that decapitation phase, but it comes in with a lot of tension, a lot of waiting for the bubble to burst, and we have to really sort of grit our teeth, knuckle down, and get through it. The mundane rule of thumb, well, cardinal signs, they kind of write the headlines. Newsflash, newsflash, it comes in quickly. Mutable signs distribute the news, but fixed signs build the history books, okay? They lock the collective into a specific evolutionary track that cannot be easily undone. So what happens because of this solstice chart, it's going to be very much a process of solidifying the new that wants to be formed for a long-term period. So fixed signs are well known in mundane astrology as the slowest moving of all signs, that change doesn't happen rapidly, it doesn't come in fast. And so they denote, in terms of timing in astrology, fixed signs denote the longest time intervals. Cardinal signs are the fastest, mutable signs take a middle amount of time. But the house placement of this key Mars-Algol conjunction is what will modify the timing. And so I'd encourage you at this point to perhaps stop the video and take the time to cast a chart for the moment of solstice, the moment that the sun hits 0 degrees of Cancer, in your part of the world, in your city, in your region. Cast yourself a chart and see in what house in whole sign astrology Mars Algol conjunction is occurring, because that's going to be the key to the timing for whether or not something happens to your area of the world related to these things we've been talking about. So first off, check your chart, and if you see that the Mars Algol conjunction is in either the 1st house, the 4th house, the 7th house, or the 10th house, then we're talking about the potential for some kind of manifestation of the things we've been talking about in either months or weeks. These are the angular houses, and they give a planet the power to act. So they pull that planet and everything it represents, in this case Mars Algol, out of the massive delay of the fixed sign and into a more moderate time frame because it's sitting angularly. So again, just to repeat, if that's where they're placed, Mars Algol is placed in your chart of your particular area of the world for solstice, you know that there might be some kind of activation in your area of the world in a matter of weeks or months. Now, if Mars Algol happens to sit in the 2nd house or the 5th house or the 8th house or the 11th house in whole sign astrology, what happens then is the fixed sign Taurus and this succedent house, which is what I've just described these houses, they match a natural rhythm together. And this can push any would-be events that may come of this solstice chart far into the future. So we're talking years or months or years, like a long time. It's slowing down that otherwise speedy time frame we just spoke about for the angular houses. So I hope this makes sense. Succedent houses, house 2, 5, 8, or 11. If that's where Mars Algol is, then it's going to take, in your part of the world, months or years to see any results of this conjunction of Mars Algol. Now, let's say you have the Mars Algol conjunction in Taurus in a cadent house. This would be the 3rd house or the 6th house or the 9th house or the 12th. This is a combination for indefinite delay, massive delay, and even nothing happening at all. But it doesn't take away the tension. Like an earthquake, the tension is there. It just never actually strikes, okay? So if you live in a part of the world where the solstice chart indicates that these two are together in a cadent house, you know that the functionality of everything we've been talking about with Mars Algol is crippled in its ability to move forward. And this often means that the matter is either going to take years to evolve or to break, or it might never break. So that is just some information on mundane astrology and astrological timing for the solstice chart we've just experienced. So my friends, where do you reside in the world? And what does the conjunction of Mars Algol look like in the solstice chart for where you live? What do you think it might mean for your part of the world? Thanks for journeying with me as we look at mundane astrology. Thank you for joining me here at World Astrology with Kesenya. I'm so glad you're here, and I look forward to sharing more fascinating astrological insights with you here in the future. Don't forget to like, share the video, and subscribe for more such videos as this coming up in the future. And if you have a request for any particular mundane astrology topic that you would like explored, I'm more than happy to look at your requests. Leave a comment in the comments section. Thank you for being here, one and all.